Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by RFA Lightweight Ernest Chavez. Ernest, how are you?
I'm good, man. Yourself?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. Ernest, you got a fight coming up December 11th at RFA 33. How's training been going for the fight?
Training's been going really well. I got lucky and I had a fight November 30th. So, right off camp and right off the fight, I knew there was a possibility of a fight coming up in December. Not necessarily this particular card, but I knew I had some options. So I didn't necessarily get out of shape, went back into the gym. I fought that Friday, went back into the gym Monday. So I haven't really skipped a beat. So everything's been going really, really well.
RFA just announced this event. Actually, it was yesterday when the official announcement came out for December 11th. So I'm just curious, when exactly did you get the offer for this fight, and who informed you that you were going to be fighting on December 11th? Was it RFA? They called you up and said, hey, do you want to fight against Adam Townsend? Or was it your manager who gave you the call, and that's how you were notified that you were going to be fighting on December 11th? How did you find out?
Well, you have so I have a manager named Jason House, and what he basically does, he talks to the promoters, and they'll just say, hey, there's a possibility you can be on the RFA card. It's on December 11th. So I go, okay, cool. Obviously, they didn't give me an opponent yet, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay in shape and work on some, make sure my cardio stays high. And then later on, they're like, well, it might be between these two guys. It depends on who's going to take the fight and so on. So then, and to be honest, it's like this a lot in the fight game. So you can't get your hopes up high sometimes, because if they give you there might be two guys, and then they might not agree to the fight. So you just never know. And so luckily, Adam took the fight, and so I got news that it was him for sure, like a day or two before the announcement. But I knew that he was a possibility. So you already start getting looking at videos and see what the particular strengths are of your opponent and so on. But yeah, it's been good. And but like I said, I got noticed it was him 2 days prior, and that's when I got the contract, signed it, and then they go ahead and do the announcement like a day or two later.
Mm-hmm. Is this a multiple fight deal with RFA, or is this just a one-off?
It's a multiple fight, 3-fight deal.
RFA has done an amazing job of getting young, up-and-coming guys into the UFC, or getting veterans like you, guys who've been there before, rebuilding them, and then getting them back into the UFC or into another big show. They've done a really good job at that. They're kind of the unofficial AAA team to the UFC. A lot of people look at them as the number one feeder to the UFC. So they're doing a great job, and they're getting a lot of guys into the big shows. So when you got released by the UFC, was RFA the organization you were hoping was going to pick you up? Was RFA the organization that you really wanted to fight for?
Most definitely. No, that was one of the first things I told my manager when I got the news I was released. I was like, well, hey, get me on the RFA card, and if I have to build myself in that organization to get to the title or whatever, I'll do so. But I already knew that everyone kind of labels them as the feeder to the UFC. And so, I most definitely wanted to get on the card. But I just been plagued with injuries throughout the whole year, and I took basically a whole year off, not because I wanted to, just because of circumstances. So, it was good just to get back in the cage and, feel alive again. And now, even more so, just having 6 weeks later to do it again is awesome.
You're fighting Adam Townsend. What are your thoughts about him as an opponent?
He looks good. He actually looks like an MMA fighter. There's a lot of people that just do hands, do kicks, do wrestling, or do jiu-jitsu, and it seems like he does. He incorporates everything. So, it looks like it's him, and I feel like I can do it all as well. So I like that. I like the fact that it's going to be, who can kind of implement their plan a little better compared to your general striker versus grappler kind of style fights. I really don't. Those for me sometimes seem somewhat boring. But right here, I think we can go every which way on the ground, top, bottom, and so on. So I think it looks to be a good action-packed fight for sure.
When RFA offered you this fight, did you know who Adam Townsend was? Did you ever see him fight before? Did you know anything about the guy? Or when they offered you this fight, you had to look him up to see who he was? Before they offered you this fight, did you have any previous knowledge of who he was?
I saw his name before, but I never saw his fights. So I had heard the name before, but it's only because I kind of monitor RFA somewhat. And so I know he had fought on the Legacy versus RFA card. Mm-hmm. And But no, I didn't see his fights and follow him up specifically. I have done that in the past, where like say when I was coming up on the the smaller promotions. I know I used to do my research. It's like, oh, I'm probably going to fight this guy because I'm the champion over here. He's the champion over there, kind of thing. But with him, no. If anything, to be honest, I was looking at Mahi Baghdad. If I'm not chopping up his name too much, but Baghdad, I would look into him because I was like, oh, he's the champion, and I might have to fight someone before him. And so, but after I saw that he had won that fight, with the RFA versus Legacy, I was like, oh, maybe I'll have to go in there and fight for a contender spot. This is all just what I was thinking. I was like, so he might be a candidate that I might have to fight, and end up being somewhat so.
Right now, Adam Townsend's on an 8-fight win streak. His last 2 fights have both been against UFC veterans. His last fight was against Ryan Roberts, and his fight before that was against Yuri Villafort. So he's on an 8-fight win streak. You're no stranger to 8-fight win streaks. You've had an 8-fight win streak before. You opened up your career with 8 straight wins. So are you impressed by Adam Townsend's 8-fight win streak?
To me, I couldn't say the word impressed, but I will say this. I will say that that's generally indicative of like a fighter, a strong fighter. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's facing adversity in his bouts and was able to come out on top. It takes a certain level of grind and toughness to fight all the way through and somehow always find a way to win. So I do respect it, But streaks really mean nothing when it really comes down to matchups, I mean, some people can pad the record. Some people have nothing but hard fights. It really just comes down to the matchups. And I think we're fairly equal. Obviously, I think I'm a little better in certain areas, or every which way, But I don't take away from the guy. I mean, I think he's a good fighter. I just don't plan to lose, and I plan to take his steam away from him and get back into the big show.
Do you watch a lot of film on your opponents? And if so, I know it's still very early in your training camp, but at this point, how much film have you watched on Adam Townsend?
You know what? I watched some film, but I want to say I watched like 2-3 fights. I let my coaches kind of look at the tapes and then just find. And then the thing is, it's like you can always reflect upon yourself and your techniques, but you might think you're better at your overhand right than what you really are. You might think you have a better shot than what it really is. So I think that's what your coaches are there for, to give you have a more objective look at it. So I think, when they look at it, they can be like, well, I think he can stop your shot, so we'll do this. Oh, I think he can easily block your overhand, so let's try this.
Right.
So I let them go ahead and look at the film, give me their take on it. I'll give them my take, and then, from there we kind of just basically form a game plan. But for the most part, their opinions weighted more than mine, to be honest.
Obviously, you're not going to tell me your game plan right now, but at this early stage in your training camp, do you have one for this fight? Do you already have a pretty good idea of what you're going to do come December 11th?
Yeah. We have a couple areas that we think that we can really thrive in, and we're gonna make sure we get in those areas.
You'll probably be able to give me a better answer after the fight, but as of right now, where does Adam Townsend rank amongst the fighters that you've faced? Obviously, you haven't fought him yet, but just off the film that you've seen, where do you rank him amongst the fighters you've fought in the past? And also, you've been in the UFC before. It's a place where Adam Townsend is trying to get to. He's trying to use the RFA as a springboard to get himself into the UFC, and he's fought a couple of UFC veterans in his last 2 fights, and he's going to try to add you to his resume and make it 3 UFC veterans in a row that he's beaten and try to ride this 9-fight win streak into the UFC. So he's trying to get past you and try to make it to the UFC. So I'm just curious in knowing, just on what you've seen so far, does he look UFC caliber?
Yes. I think the first guy I fought in the UFC, his name was Yodenis Cedeno. I think he's better than that guy. He's probably not better than the second guy I fought in the UFC, which was a guy named Elias Severio. And he probably wasn't better than the last guy I fought in the UFC. I can't even chop up his name right now. That's a wrestling 145er that I fought. But Zabara, I can't know his first name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, he's good though. He's good enough to be on that platform for sure. Which is more reason that I'm excited to even take the fight with him. I'm sure that he's a prospect that they're at the very least they're looking at. If I want to get back into that platform, I need to fight people like him, people on that precipice.
You were supposed to have a fight against Josh Emmett, but you had to pull out of that fight. You were actually offered him 2 times, but injuries prevented you from taking those fights.
Yeah, both injuries, man. I felt bad for him. I saw the guy later on, and I just tried to offer an apology. I came in, I'm sorry. I know how it is to go through a camp and it should fall through. So I really am apologetic towards that. In all means, I am not scared to fight anyone, but at the same time, I gotta make sure I take care of myself. And if I get injured, I can't just fight on an injury. So, but yeah, he was a guy that got matched up twice at West Coast Fighting Championships.
Mm-hmm. You're no stranger to main events. You fought in the main event before. Is that a big deal for you to be fighting in the main event, or does it really not matter where you fight on a card?
I don't care where I fight in the card. To be honest, it's a little easier when you're like the first one because they generally have the time that you're going to be fighting, so you have an idea like, oh, I'll warm up this many minutes before and cool down here, and you have just a closer idea when you're going to fight. Compared to a main event, you're like, I think I should warm up 5 fights away, and then all of a sudden they're all knockouts, and then you're kind of you wish you could have warmed up a little earlier, or you warmed up for like 45 minutes in the back, and they're only in the 3rd fight. You're like, man, come on, so that's the only good thing about being the first one. But I don't care; it makes no difference to me. And ultimately, I feel like it's not going to change anything that's going to happen inside the cage. I'm not worried about nerves or anything like that. At this point, I don't really get too many of them. You get like a little rush, but it's not necessarily like nervousness, I guess. It's just more like kind of excitement, adrenaline. Yeah, I'm here, Mm-hmm. Most fighters enjoy doing this, and so for us, it's more fun and it's exhilarating, And after a while, you just miss it. So for me, it's not a bad thing to wait. It's just But at the very end of the day, I do want to get in the cage and get it done.
This fight is going to be taking place at the hangar at the OC Fairground. How far away is that from your house? Is that 15 minutes, an hour, 30 minutes? How far away is that from where you live?
I think I'm literally like 7 miles away.
So do you consider this a hometown fight?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't born and raised in Orange County, but I moved out here maybe about like 9 years ago, and I established myself at, when, my adulthood's been here for the most part in my professional career. So, yeah, I know lots of people in this area. It does feel like home. I did fight at the hangar before, and when I was in the lower, some other promotions in the past. Mm-hmm. So, I know the people there. Yeah, it's going to be a warm feeling for sure.
It's probably too early for you to say right now because the fight was just announced yesterday. But if you had to guess, what kind of turnout are you expecting at the fight? I'm sure you're hoping that the entire crowd is cheering for you. But how many people are you hoping shows up to the event to cheer for you? Obviously, you're only 7 miles away, so I'm sure a lot of people are coming, and I'm sure it's going to be a hometown crowd because Adam Townsend is not from California. But as of right now, if you could give me a projection of what you think the ticket sales for you are going to be, how many people do you expect to be at the fight come December 11th? I work out like at 3 different gyms, but all 3 different gyms have another fighter in that gym that's going to be fighting on the RFA card. If I just target the one specifically for me, probably like 100. Collectively, between all 3 gyms, it could be, a couple hundred. But I mean, like I said, like an example, I am at Tola MMA Studios. I have another guy named Christian Aguilera who's going to be fighting on that card against, I forgot the guy's first name, but last name is Padilla. Well, I mean, he's a hot ticket seller as well. Besides his own family, he has his own people right there at the gym that are going to be buying from him instead of me. At my other gym, Misfits MMA, Luke Bartol is going to be fighting there on the RFA card. He's going to be selling tickets, for that gym. So it's, it cuts into that a little bit, if they're coming specifically for me. But nonetheless, collectively as teams, we're gonna have a lot of people there, at least a couple hundred. Ernest, will end on this. It's a little segment I like to call Really Random. That's where I ask you a random question and you give me the real answer. Some of these questions are custom-made just for you, and some of these questions are generic ones that I ask all the people I interview. So here's the first question. Superpower you'd love to have?
Teleportation.
Favorite movie?
Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Movie you've seen the most times?
Tropic Thunder.
Favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite guilty pleasure?
Pizza.
Are you going by EJ now? Because I noticed on the RFA 33 poster, it doesn't say Ernest anywhere. It just says EJ.
You know what? Everyone knows me as EJ. But obviously my real name is Ernest. But anyone that's ever met me, knows me, talks to me, everyone always calls me EJ. So I don't mind either one. And as a matter of fact, when I filled out the information for like RFA and all the information, like I put Ernest, you know. But yeah, everyone calls me EJ, and I'm pretty sure my coaches and manager has kept in contact with RFA, and they probably just refer to me as EJ. But I'm not sure, you know, how that transferred over there to them. But either way, I don't mind. You know, it's the same to me.
I thought your real name was Ernesto because I remember when you were fighting for Bama USA, they used to call you that. Yeah,
they did, but it was never Ernesto. I think it's because my last name's Chavez. They just added the O at the end.
Oh,
but no, it's Ernest Joshua. So that's what EJ stands for. So yeah, they kind of took it upon themselves, I guess, at that point.
How did you get the nickname the Mad Titan?
Oh, it's a joke, man. Like, it's you know, you always make yourself like. People always think like, oh, if I was a superhero, it was this. Well, and then I was like, well, if I'm a villain, I wouldn't want to be a superhero. I want to be a villain, like Thanos, because I like read comic books and stuff in that nature, you know. And so it was more like a joke. And we have another joke too. Where, like, there's one called they call me GOAT, like the greatest of all time.
Right.
It's a joke because it started when we were playing video games, and I would beat people in these tournaments, and so we'd make the joke, oh, GOAT, I'm the greatest of all time. And so when I started fighting, that was the first joke name they kind of gave me. Obviously, not the greatest of all time, but it was humorous at the time because it derived from video games, not fighting. I think this is just from a Marvel comic villain. One more notably that has like blue and gold all over him, and that's my high school colors, you know, and from Raleigh, California. So it just seemed like it made sense.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of names, I've noticed on your Twitter profile that you have a lot of names. So I want to ask you about some of these. You have former UFC fighter, friend, brother, uncle, cousin, nephew, son, coach. I know all those. Why do you have Gordo?
Gordo is just like a fat boy, in Spanish.
Right.
I used to be a little bigger when I was younger. Yeah, even bigger when I was older. So, but at some points, but yeah.
Okay, next name, Mink Maker.
Oh, that was another joke, like a parody joke, because the people were always saying like, "Oh, I'm a beast," and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna make a mink at your fur," you know. So we always make these jokes. Oh, that's a beast. Call me the Mink Maker. I'm gonna go tear this guy up, and then we would make these jokes, and it really derives from just fighting a lot, man. We in the gym, you make so many different jokes. Most of them derogatory, but you know, you make a bunch of jokes, and sometimes when I made the Twitter account, I was trying to just you know, put every single label and joke that I've ever had about myself or as my name, you know.
What about Peaches?
Oh, Peaches are right from like it was like a movie, and there was it sounds weird, but it was like a small woman that was always like talking crap to, like there was this guy, these big old guys, and then I was always small when I was there, so for some reason they called me Peaches, like that woman. I'm like, oh really? But only one or two people ever really like called me that. But I thought, it's a nickname that they threw at me before. And
finally, Boo. What's the story on that one?
That was from like at the time it was my 2 girlfriends ago, 2 exes ago. That's what she called me, and that's around the time I made the Twitter account.
Go-to song when you're singing in the shower?
You know, I like the Jay-Z PSA. It's called Public Service Announcement by Jay-Z.
Favorite restaurant?
I probably don't have. I don't. Oh, you know, Johnny's Burritos. And there's from my hometown. There's this place called Johnny's Burritos, and you know, all through my childhood and my high school and all that. You know, the childhood years, I was able to eat there, and man, even to this day, every time I go down, I always go over there. It's like the spot I have to go to. So I generally don't go down during camp because I gotta make sure I maintain my weight. You know, It's good food, but I eat too much of it.
Favorite TV show, and it can be a TV show currently on the air or a TV show that's no longer on the air. Just overall favorite TV show.
I'd say Game of Thrones. I don't know if it's just because I know I have some childhood memories for like The Simpsons and stuff like that, but I feel like Game of Thrones is the most entertaining one I've seen that's been like unorthodox and unpredictable, and I like that about things. I like that kind of style to it. So
your UFC record is 1-2. You won your UFC debut and then lost the next 2 fights and were released by the promotion. Were you surprised that they let you go? Because usually the magic number is 3. Once a fighter loses 3 straight fights, that's when the UFC cuts them. So were you surprised when the UFC cut you?
No, I mean, it's a performance-based business, So, I mean, the fact is, even if I, at the time I didn't want to get released, the fact I got finished twice, I got finished by, Severio at the end of the 3rd, and I got finished by Zabara at the end of the 1st. So, I mean, I think a lot of times when you lose, as long as it's close, I think they'll keep you for like that number 3. But if you're losing 2 times and you're getting finished, I think at the very least, it's somewhat warranted, or it can be warranted, So, I mean, I don't want it, but I don't mind because I understand. Of course, next time the one thing that I think I made mistakes on were like small things like I thought going out of the country wouldn't have an effect, and it does. The trip in itself can be taxing, let alone the water retention from from being in there so long. When you go to a new country, you don't know exactly what they have. So an example would be like in Brazil, they didn't have distilled water, and I normally have a system that I do with distilled water, which helps me lose an extra pound or 2. It's not the biggest thing, but when you don't have it and you don't get that extra pound or 2 off, you have to sweat it out a little, and every pound counts when you're in the sauna. So little things like that can add up just a little bit. But yeah, and then I actually dropped to 145, or attempted to drop to 145 in my last outing at the UFC, and I came off an injury, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't mind going 145, but it was either fighting in January or fight like 6 weeks from then." And it was like, I think it was like September, and I was like, "Damn, I didn't want to like not fight for a long time because that's your livelihood." So I took it. I should have like actually waited and got down a lot lower because I ended up cutting close to 20 pounds of actual water to make that fight, which was atrocious, which is like the worst thing I've ever been through. I learned a lot from those experiences, but I totally understand why they cut.
We've seen fighters get cut, and we've heard stories about how they get cut. Joe Silva calls them, Sean Shelby calls them, or one of those 2 guys emails them, and that's how they find out they've been cut. Or their manager gets a phone call or an email from Joe Silva or Sean Shelby, and then they relay the message from the matchmaker to the fighter, and that's how they find out. Or we've heard some craziness where fighters are finding out on Twitter that they've been cut. Some media outlets post it, and then people retweet it, and then somehow it gets back to the fighter, and then the fighter finds out that way and doesn't get a call from his manager or the matchmakers at the UFC. They just find out through Twitter. So who gave you the news when the UFC released you?
I found out through my manager. He had, I think, was talking to Sean Shelby, and Sean Shelby let him know.
Is it UFC or bust for you? Is your goal to make it back to the UFC, or are you open to fighting in other shows, say Bellator, World Series of Fighting, some of the other bigger promotions? Is it UFC only, or are you still open to fighting for anyone?
I'm open to any big show, to be honest, I like to fight, so I'm going to do my best to be the best that I can and fight whoever. I really don't care who I fight, but fight the best, Now, if I'm trying to be realistic with myself, I'm 32. Dude, can I make it to be a champion at 155? The odds are a few, very, very minimal, but I'll still strive for it, whether it be in the UFC, Bellator, or wherever else. I'm still open to any big platform. But I know I got to make sure that I'm worth their investment, so that's why I plan to go show what I'm really about. And, to be honest, making the adjustment, switching gears from like the lower regional promotions to UFC, I did step up a lot of things. It just, at first it was just somewhat too overwhelming. Now that I got, a better handle on it, I really feel that I learned to maximize my time a little more and understand how to, I guess, just manage myself a little more with because I had to increase the workouts like a great deal if you want to be on those platforms. And I feel like I got that all down now, and that's why I was able to have a better outing in my last fight, and I plan to have a better outing this one too.
You started fighting professionally in 2009, and by 2014, you were in the UFC. Your UFC run didn't last that long. You only had 3 fights in the UFC, and you didn't even last a year inside the UFC. You were released in October of 2014 after you suffered your second straight loss. So, my question to you is, what's harder? Is it harder to make it to the UFC, or is it harder to stay in the UFC?
Harder to stay. The UFC, I mean, they're a business, and they'll branch out to the regional promotions to pull in their champions. At the time, I was already like a champion for Bama and for OC Fight Club. So at the very least, if they were going to look for some people in California, they're going to probably go towards the champions to pull in. But to stay there is hard. You know, you're talking about, you're realistically fighting a tournament of champions. I mean, they're not going to pull a guy who's just a contender from a promotion into their rankings. You know, they're going to, oh, that's a top guy in this promotion, it's just a top guy in that promotion, and then they'll take those champions, bring them up to the UFC, and then you'll find nothing but champions, people who have already gave their time, paid their dues most of the time. You know, I would say like 95% of the time they earned their spots there. You know, they know about sacrifice and not scared, and to go and work hard and master the pain. So, it's a lot harder to stay there.
Your last fight was back on October 30th at TWC 23. You fought a very tough guy, very experienced guy, Justin Buchholz. He's one of the top guys out of Team Alpha Male. You knocked him out in the first round. How pleased were you with your performance in that fight?
You know what? I was pleased, with the performance for sure. You know, to end the fight in the first round is always awesome. But I want to say that there was a couple things that, I didn't like. There was at one point where I actually took him down, and I thought I was doing a good amount of pressure, but he ended up getting up, and I didn't like the fact that I lapsed on my pressure a little bit when I had such an advantageous position. So that was one thing I wanted to make sure I fixed up. I think he got like 1 or 2 kicks on me. You know, I didn't like that. Given that I knew he was going to be doing something like that, like those particular kicks and style, I was like, oh, okay, he's going to do this. And then the fact that I trained for it, and then he still got 1 or 2 in, I'm like, that was upsetting. So, I mean, small little things that, obviously we can critique that I got to keep on focusing on. But overall, yeah, I was happy with the performance. I felt confident in my striking coach that he was telling me specifically what to do. And it was very gratifying to have exactly what we trained in the gym to transfer into that fight, because we knew he was going to block a certain way, put his hands up a certain way, and we capitalized on that, we did in training, and so when we did it right there in the fight, it was just really very, very gratifying.
Is it true that you had to cut off all your hair and shave your beard to make weight? And if so, why? Did you have a bad weight cut for that fight?
No, that is true, but it wasn't because of a bad weight cut. We did the whole weight cut. It was pretty clean, and on top of that, I had 2 scales, and both scales had said I was like a quarter of a pound under. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm straight. Mm-hmm. Even if their scale's off, it shouldn't be too bad. So we go over there, and when I weigh in, I'm actually over. But I have, like, underwear on, but it's like, I think I'm like, it's teetering between 0.4 and 0.6. So finally, when we stay still, it goes down to 0.4. So I have, like, these heavy underwear on, I'm like, okay, and then the scale was not like, I'm not going to say not as professional. It's just not as accurate as some of the other ones. Like it seems like one of those scales where if you tilt a certain way, or if it's slightly on a slant, it's really going to change the weight significantly. So I'm like, all right. So I'm looking at the guy, and I'm kind of like, well, come on, man. Like, I could take the underwear off, and I'm probably 0.2. If I lean a certain way, I'm basically on point. I mean, I'm trying to look at the guy and trying to just rationalize it with him. Like,
right.
Let's be real. But he went back to my coach. They went back to my coach and said, oh, no, we'll talk about 20%. I'm like, really, man? I said, that's fine. So I knew that at the very least, I would take 0.2 off, and I was going to be 0.2 over possibly. So I went, and I had a whole beard, and I had a head full of hair, and so I took it off real quick, and I came back and made weight pretty easy. Luckily, the place we were staying at, the hotel, was literally across the street. So I walked over there, and I walked back probably within 10 minutes. But yeah, I did my weight technically by taking off my beard and my hair.
Piece of technology you can't live without.
Piece of technology. Phone.
Website you visit most often.
Sure, dog.
What's the best thing that ever happened to you?
Best thing that ever happened to me? I don't know. I love my life. I was born.
What's the worst thing that ever happened to you?
to be honest, I haven't had like the hardest. I mean, I had obstacles in your life all the time, but nothing where I thought to myself, man, this is horrible. I can't believe this. You know, there's always been deaths in the family. You know, one of my grandpas passed. And you have people that pass away. You know, so you don't wish that. I mean, I guess, I guess more recently it was like the passing of my brother-in-law, which affected my nephews and nieces. You know, I didn't. You know, that shook me up first for them, not necessarily for myself because I understand mortality, but you know, those kind of things that, you know. But yeah, for the most part, I couldn't identify to say just one thing.
If you could stay one age forever, how old would you stay?
Well, I'm 32 now. 32.
So you'd stay the age you are right now, if it was possible?
Yeah, because I think at like 28, I was too stupid. So I think now at 32, I'm well aware of everything around me, people, places, everything like that. Top of my game in that regard. So I don't care so much about, and then on top of that, I think I'm in probably better shape than I was at 20, than when I was at 28. So yeah, 32.
What's your pet peeve?
I hate saying the same thing over and over, like say like 3 times. Especially if I said it like loud enough and I was nice and they just like obviously with kids it's probably the worst, but I don't got any. But like I have nieces and nephews where you ask them something and they don't do it, and you ask them again, and they're like, "Oh, come on, you hear me?" Yeah.
Right. Celebrity people say you look like?
Jason Statham.
Now let's say you found a magic lamp and you rubbed that magic lamp and a genie appeared and the genie said he was going to grant you 3 wishes. What would those 3 wishes be?
An extra 100 years of life, because I wouldn't want the immortality, that's too long. I guess be able to teleport wherever I like in a moment, and to make sure my family's well off the rest of their life. I wouldn't care about world peace, and I just don't think it would happen. So, I mean, I don't know. If it did, I always feel like, oh, world peace, and then world peace would happen, and then it would just totally go back again.
Person you look up to the most?
My father.
Time period you'd like to go back and visit, and why?
I don't know what actual year it would be, but like back in the days when they're building the pyramids, I would like to be there just to see how this process worked. Yeah.
Are you a full-time fighter, or do you work a second job?
No, I have I do personal training. I coach other people to fight and stuff like that, and just trying to save up for my own gym at one point.
What's your porn star name? If you combined your childhood pet with the street you grew up on, what would your porn name be?
Bubba Stanley.
What do you worry about? What's something that keeps you up at night?
I'm very family-oriented, and I'm one of the few... I think I'm the only member of my immediate family that's actually went away from the town we were born and raised on, and I'm away from them, And it's not like a states away, but, you just never get to see family all the time like you once did. And I have, 10 nieces and nephews besides another brother and sister, 4 sisters, 1 brother. So I guess sometimes I just worry about, how are they doing and if everything's good, because, I actually want to be there at times and I just can't. The fact is, they're growing up in their teens right now, some of them. And, I know I got little gems of advice from my uncles and people in my life that I consider role models, and I wish I was there to give them some things like that when I can. So, I mean, just their well-being, I guess, in general, my family's well-being. Mm-hmm. Same with I don't care about Ebola and stuff like that. Yeah,
Best advice you were ever given through life, and best advice you were ever given through fighting, and who gave it to you?
Let's see. My dad, he always told me to adapt, improvise, and overcome. And I take that way everything. I'm like, this is a bad situation. Okay, let me adapt, let's improvise here, and then get past it, So I've always carried that with me through just life in general. For fighting, I had like we did like some seminars before, and like, you go into like, when I barely started, like, say, fighting, there was like these little seminars for these gyms, and I don't even know the guy's name, but he was always talking about, the way to get better at MMA is just the ability to learn. And he's always talking about that a lot of people don't have that ability. People always want to latch onto what they know and never expand out. And so they were always saying, like, if we do drills and so on, I want you to do them with a clear mind and don't think about the application for the specific scenario in your head, that it will come in time. It's just a tool that we're developing so you can use it whenever it is applicable. And so I kept that throughout my whole career, and it's always bear me fruit, where I put myself in these situations where I have to learn, not necessarily go back to things I know. So it helped me expand on my overall fighting techniques, and even some of the, what we call like the gray area, the punches to the takedowns, that transition, the wrestling into the jiu-jitsu, that transition, the kicks into the punches, to, you know, like the small little transitions inside fighting that I focus all of my learning. I try to focus all my learning there, and so I don't think that would have been as good if I didn't have that small little piece of advice that I took to heart. I don't even know the guy's name, to be honest.
It was great advice, but not great enough to remember the guy's name.
So I never got the information, but I always thought it was just a cool thing to say, and then later on, it just happened to have a profound effect on how I looked at things when, the longer I got into the sport.
Now, because you're going to be fighting on December 11th, what's your Thanksgiving going to be looking like?
Oh, man, I had to, like I said before, I can't go down to my hometown because my family just cooks all the time and everything, and Thanksgiving is always, a big deal, but I'm going to have to, take myself out that situation just to make sure that I'm on point. Like, my weight is fantastic right now, but I think if I went over there, I might mess it up, so I got to just stay kind of local, and probably just in my apartment and not even try to, go out anywhere. I think I'm going to just stay home and look at TV, do some other work. I'm not going to go down and visit family, nor am I going to go to someone else's house over here, like in my area in Orange County. I just stay home, stay away from the temptation. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So one Thanksgiving dinner could make the difference between you making weight and not making weight?
No, but it's like a binge thing, man. Like, when you haven't splurged, say, for a while, then you don't miss it. You're like, oh, I'm good. I just keep on doing what I'm doing, and everything is good. But when you start eating, it's gonna start wearing on my mind. Like once I have gravy, I'm like, I want gravy, and it's gonna have an effect on not just that meal right there, the meal going forward towards the fight. Like, oh, yeah, just a little cheese on it won't hurt. Oh, I'll just have one Pepsi. It's not gonna be a big deal. Things like that would start adding up, and all of a sudden, I'll just be 1 or 2 pounds heavier than what I would have been, and that just means that I have to cut more, and I wouldn't want to cut more. I'm anti-cutting water weight like all crazy, so especially after that horrible weight cut I had in Sweden, never again.
What's your hidden talent?
Hidden talent? I don't know, talent. Oh, natural ability. I'm good at math, naturally, but no, I don't got any specific hidden talent, I don't think.
Number one thing on your bucket list?
I guess I wanted to go to Africa and go to one of those safaris, where you see lions and stuff like that, that kind of thing. That was my number one thing that I want to do to get out the way, or like I said, the bucket list of it before I die.
If you could change one thing about the world, what would you change and why?
Greed. I think most problems derive from greed. So if no one was greedy, I think it'd be a lot easier. There's less wars, less hunger, so on and so forth.
Ernest, real quick before I let you go, do you have any sponsors you'd like to thank, and is there anything you'd like to say to the fans?
Yeah, the sponsors, I have Bradco, Versa Climber, MMA Conditioning Association, I have Horty Control, I have so many, I have Franchise Custom, I have so many different people that I need to thank, my training partners, my coaches, and so on. As far as, to the fans, come out, check me out December 11th. If not, we'll be live on Access TV. Come out and support or watch. We plan to make it exciting.
Ernest, thank you for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it. Good luck December 11th at RFA 33 against Adam Townsend.
All right. Thank you, Mike.